woke up early, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao. One fine morning, I woke up early to find the fascists at my door.
Thank you all for coming. So this is an event hosted by an organization, a registered student organization, Students Against Fascism and War. We're basically just a sort of an organization that aims at giving students a voice and a platform to organize and sort of amplify their own sort of messages in regards to opposing fascism domestically, opposing like internet wars conducted by the U.S. And those type of activities, imperialistic activities. So that's basically the mission of Students Against Fascism and War. We're not officially affiliated with any organization. We try and usually be non-sectarian, but we'll organize with whoever's willing to, whoever's relevant to the message we're trying to put out. So tonight we're having this event, this panel. We're going to have each speaker is going to speak on. There's three sort of main topics, and each of the speakers is going to address them in their presentation. So the first one is fascism and the strategy for its defeat. The next one is fascism and what's the correct orientation towards fascism and free speech. And finally, the last topic will be they'll be touching on possible the sort of the dynamic between fascist and the sort of police practice and this how that plays out. So our first panelist, that will be, each panelist will be given 20 minutes to speak on that, 15 to 20 minutes, their presentation. And then after each of them have gone through that, they'll be given a short, brief period, 5 minutes to respond to what each of the others have said, and then we'll have Q&A. So our first panelist that will speak is Rafael Kadaris. He's an organizer with the Revolution Club. He's an employee at Revolution Books, and he's been active in the Refuse Fascism organization as well. So, here we go.
Thanks, Adam. Just one correction: Revolution Books doesn't have any employees. It's all volunteer. Let me see if I can get this thing on. Check. Is that working? It's not really.
Yeah, it's all right.
It's all right? Okay, good enough. So, what's up, everyone? First of all, I just want to say that this is not an academic discussion. This is not a scholastic discussion. This is a very urgent and timely discussion, and I'm really happy to be part of this event. We're as we're sitting here, thousands of people are dead in Puerto Rico because we have an open white supremacist in the White House. It's because of the whole history of U.S. imperialism and colonial domination over that island, but it's also because you have a fascist regime in power that threw paper towels at the people that and treated them with just total callous disregard, and calls whole nations shithole nations because their black and brown people live there, but meanwhile welcomes the people from Norway to come. What does that signify? Calling Mexicans rapists and drug dealers and criminals, this type of dehumanizing language. As we're meeting here today, 13,000 people, immigrant children, are in concentration camps. The Muslim ban is in effect. Women's right to abortion, women's rights in general, LGBTQ rights are under attack like they haven't been for a long time, and really are on the brink of total disaster. The Supreme Court has had a right-wing majority. They're about to have a fascist majority on the Supreme Court if Kavanaugh gets in here. We have a demented bully with his finger on the nuclear trigger. Someone that said he wants to kill the families of suspected terrorists, someone that threatened nuclear war multiple times against North Korea and has done so against Iran as well. said he wants to do worse than waterboarding, you know, openly celebrating torture of human beings, a war crime, by the way. As we're gathered here today, we're also, you know, at a particular moment in history when the future of the planet is really on the brink of going past the point of no return when it comes to climate change and environmental devastation on many fronts, from endangered species to air and water and coral reefs and rainforests. And you have a regime that's packed this cabinet full of climate change deniers, know-nothing, anti-science, fossil fuel executives, shredding, you know, environmental protections on every front. But here I just want to make the point, this is an important point, fascism, you know, we could spend the rest of the night talking about all the horrible things that the Trump-Pence regime have done in their first 2 years, you know, but fascism is not just a collection of horrific policies. Fascism is actually a qualitative change in the whole way that society is governed. And here, I don't know if everyone got a copy of this. What is fascism? This is from RevCom, the website of the Revolutionary Communist Party. But the first paragraph, it makes the point. Fascism is the exercise of blatant dictatorship by the bourgeois capitalist imperialist class, through reliance on open terror and violence, trampling on what are supposed to be civil and legal rights, wielding the power of the state, and mobilizing organized groups of fanatical thugs to commit atrocities against masses of people, particularly groups of people identified as enemies, undesirables, or dangers to society. And this is a really important point. You know, fascism is not, again, it's not just more bad shit. And when I call Trump a fascist, which I think he is a fascist, maybe others on the panel disagree, we can talk about that, whatever. When I call Trump a fascist, it's not name calling, it's not hyperbole, it's not just like, fuck Trump, I hate this guy, I'm gonna call him a fascist. But fuck Trump, I hate him, and I'm gonna call him a fascist. But there's actual substance to it, right? You know, this is someone who appointed someone like Stephen Miller to be one of his chief advisors and speechwriters. You know, I don't know if you guys remember after the federal judge blocked the first Muslim ban, what Stephen Miller said. He said, "The president's authority is very substantial and will not be questioned." If that is not a fascist statement, I don't know what is. You know, this is, fascism means the concentration of power in the executive, the attacking of checks and balances, you know, the supposed checks and balances, the attacking of the media, and then, as I said, the unleashing of mass violence from below, right? Against those identified as undesirables. And we've seen that from Charlottesville to Berkeley to all across the rise in hate crimes all across this country. Even these rallies that Trump continues to have, they call them campaign rallies, but really they should be understood more as Nuremberg rallies. Nuremberg rallies were the rallies that the Nazis had every year, in which they kept their base, you know, mobilized and ready to attack those political opponents, but also, you know, as we know, they went after beating up people in the streets, Jews, communists. And it was both, again, it was both the power from the executive, the changes in the laws, the state level, federal level, and state level policies that were being changed, and it was the unleashing of extrajudicial violence from below. And I think we're seeing the beginnings of that on both fronts with this regime. You know, the second part of this card, right? And it says, at the same time, and this can be seen through studying the examples of Nazi Germany and Italy under Mussolini, while it will likely move to quickly enforce certain repressive measures in consolidating its rule, a fascist regime is also likely to implement its program overall through a series of stages, and even attempts at different points to reassure the people, or certain groups among the people, that they will escape the horrors if they quietly go along and do not protest or resist, while others are being terrorized and targeted for repression, deportation, conversion, prison, or execution. And, you know, the way I understand the current moment that we're in is that you do have a fascist regime in power. They've taken strides in pushing forward a fascist agenda. A lot of that agenda, which was outrageous yesterday, has now become the new norm. You know, there's a whole process of normalization that has happened. If you guys remember, when the first Muslim ban was passed, I don't know, were any of you guys at the airport protesting? Mm-hmm. That was really important, right? But then it got blocked, and then Trump came back with Muslim ban 2.0. And then that got blocked, and he came back with Muslim ban 3.0. And now the Supreme Court just, you know, confirmed it, ratified it, and now it's in effect. And where are the people protesting, right? So it's just these things just become background noise. You know, immigrants, families separated, right? A lot of us were out protesting that, but now Trump said, okay, I got a solution to that. Well, let's keep the families together in the same prisons, right? So now those same kids are still sitting in prison, and some of them are sitting there by themselves, and some of them are sitting there with their families, right? So, you know, there's this process of normalization, and they've actually pushed their agenda forward, but they haven't actually succeeded in fully consolidating or implementing their program. And I think what we're seeing is fascism in the early stages, you know, and the lesson from history, the lesson from Nazi Germany is you have to stop this shit before it's too late, right? You know, there's a famous quote a lot of you guys probably know from Pastor Niemöller. First they came for the communists, but I wasn't a communist, so I didn't say anything. Then they came for the Jews. Then they came for the trade unionists. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up. And can't we all say that first they came for the Muslims, then they came for the immigrants, and we could go down the line. Now, they've only come for them to a certain degree. There's been pushback, there's been this and that. But, you know, fascism also, again, moves in stages and moves in leaps. You guys know one of the main ways that Hitler was able to consolidate power in Nazi Germany? It was something called the Reichstag fire. Raise your hand if you know what that was. Few people. So the Reichstag fire was not that long after Hitler actually was appointed chancellor. And basically what happened is the German parliament building burned down. The Nazis blamed the communists. It's unclear, but it might have been the Nazis themselves who orchestrated it. But in any case, it was used by Hitler and the Nazis to create emergency measures and consolidate power. And you know, this is the kind of thing, I don't know about you, but you know, one of my big fears is we're like one Reichstag fire away from the consolidation of fascism, one 9/11, right? Just think about what Bush used 9/11 as an excuse to do, right? To wage this unending war on terror, to strip away civil liberties, the Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, you know, mob violence against Muslims in the streets. You know, and then imagine if there's some incident, either a real incident or something that's manufactured, right? And imagine what someone like Donald Trump and his regime would try to use that as an excuse to do. Now, you know, some people say that fascism couldn't happen here in America, right? Not with our great traditions and our values and our Constitution and all of this, right? But, you know, let's keep it real. Like, this is, who wrote that Constitution? You know, who were those founding fathers? What is this country, right? You know, what was one of the most fundamental rights that was enshrined in that great Constitution of ours? The right to private property. Who was private property at the time that Constitution was written?
White males?
No, who was private property?
Oh, who was private property?
Yeah, who was considered property at that time? You know, black
enslaved
people, right?
Africans?
Human beings. So, you know, and these founding fathers were, you know, not only, oh, they were slave owners, but then their ideals contradicted their actions and stuff. You know, this was the original sin, but the ideals are really great. No, again, in the Constitution enshrined is the right to own other human beings, right, and do what you want with them. And Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, these were not just slave owners, these were people who actively fought for the expansion of slavery all over this country. And slavery is not just some incidental thing about America, it's foundational to the wealth and power of this country. You know, and I think that's really important to recognize that, oh, one little other fact. Who is Donald Trump's favorite president? Historical president.
Jackson.
And what's Andrew Jackson famous for?
Trail of Tears.
Huh?
Trail of Tears.
Yeah.
Massive human rights violations against Native Americans.
Exactly. Besides himself being a notorious slave owner, was also a genocidal maniac against the Native people in this country and drove the Cherokees, you know, on this horrific Trail of Tears. That's Donald Trump's favorite president. That tells you everything you need to know about this man, you know. And you know, this Donald Trump is not some aberration from America. I think this is an important point. He's nothing but a grotesque concentration of everything ugly about this country since day one. You know, I could say this country was founded on slavery and genocide and theft of land from Mexico and all, and you guys probably know all that, and it really doesn't do justice to just say these things. You have to, like, you know, you have to get inside what that actually means, right? And there's still these, you know, motherfuckers out there waving that Confederate flag, right? And talking about this is just our heritage. What the fuck kind of heritage was it? You know, go watch a movie like 12 Years a Slave, or, you know, the Nat Turner movie, and find out what is really being celebrated here. You know, and on top of that, there was the whole ideological justification, the white supremacy, the manifest destiny. This is our God-given right to spread our tentacles all over the world, the white man's burden to colonize the uncivilized, all this kind of shit, right? And people, you know, ask, well, why did so many people vote for someone like Donald Trump? Why did so many, and it wasn't just working class white people, it was white people across every demographic that voted for this man, right? You know, it would have been, you know, it would have been a disgrace if 10 people had voted for him, or 10,000, but tens of millions of people did. And you can't separate that from the fact that this is a country where white people, like, fucking went to picnics at lynchings, you know, and took family pictures, you know, and took home mutilated pieces of the mutilated body as souvenirs. You know, this is the fucking history of this country, and that, you know, with a few brief exceptions, right? We can talk about John Brown, who led, you know, slave uprising, you know, uprising against slavery. You know, or we could look at the generation that came about in the 1960s, which was an important exception. But throughout the history of this country, it's been a fucking racist country, and that tells you a lot about the rise of fascism in America today and the particular form of that fascism. Just to take a minute on there's sort of that long history of what's produced a monster like Donald Trump and the fascists that we're seeing unleashed all across this country, but there's also a more immediate history, and you could, you know, and it has to do with the particular challenges that this capitalist imperialist system is facing post-World War II, the rise of different powers, demographic changes, social changes, economic changes. We can talk about some of that in the Q&A if you want. But the result of that has been a fascist movement that has actually been growing in this country for decades now, actually. And, you know, you could trace it back to the Southern strategy, the Republican Southern strategy in the 1960s, Barry Goldwater and especially Richard Nixon. You could go up to Ronald Reagan, and where did Ronald Reagan start his campaign, by the way? Philadelphia, Mississippi, his campaign for president. Philadelphia, Mississippi, proclaiming his support for states' rights, which in America, in the context of America, is code for racism, right? Philadelphia, Mississippi, where a group of civil rights workers was murdered in the 60s. You could go up to George W. Bush, right? And as I was saying, what he used 9/11 as an excuse to do, the Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, the shredding of, you know, on this fucking campus, there's a lawyer at the law school, John Yoo, who wrote the memos that Bush used to justify torture. You know, this also was a leap in the direction of fascism, and along with that, during the Bush years, he brought into his administration and himself kind of represented the whole bringing into power of the Christian fundamentalist movement, which has also been growing and represents one powerful stream of fascism in this country, a theocratic form of fascism, you know, no different from, you know, Islamic theocracy in Iran. That's what people like, you know, Mike Pence and stuff represent. They were brought significantly into power during the Bush years. And what did Obama do, you know, in the face of all this? You know, in large part, he continued the direction that Bush began, right? He continued the war on terror, which is really just a war of empire. He continued to drone bomb 7 countries. He, escalated the militarization of the border and the surveillance and the deportations of our immigrant brothers and sisters. He refused to prosecute the torturers and the war criminals. And then Trump now has come to power and taken things further. So I'm trying to make the point that there's a long history to this, there's a more immediate history, but this is something that has come is not out of nowhere. This came out very much out of the soil of this country and in this system of capitalism and imperialism. And of course, at the same time right now, there is intense infighting within the ruling class itself, right? About whether to go down this fascist road that Trump is leading things, or whether that will be harmful to the interests of the ruling class. There's two competing ruling class agendas right now at the top in this society, fighting it out amongst each other. On the one hand, you have Trump and Pence and that regime and the more open and naked white supremacy and violent assertion of executive power that want to take things down. And on the other hand, you have the multicultural imperialism, the more soft power imperialism represented by people like Obama and Hillary Clinton, who themselves are war criminals, right? Who did all these people, the opposition within the establishment, within the status quo, within the ruling class, who did that opposition rally around in the last couple of weeks? John McCain. In the death of John McCain in the last couple of weeks. Who the fuck is John McCain?
War criminal.
A war criminal. Not just, he's a war criminal, right? He flew 23 bombing raids over North Vietnam. They weren't dropping, those weren't food bombs and assistance bombs. Those were bombs dropping napalm, dropping Agent Orange, dropping death and destruction. 3 million people died in that genocidal war. There's a rewriting of history happening about the Vietnam War. 3 million people died in that war, and John McCain was one of the perpetrators of it. Now, I have friends who fought in the Vietnam War and came back and became anti-war, and regretted what they did and came back and became anti-war activists. Those people should be celebrated. John McCain came back from that war and supported every single fucking war that the U.S. ever waged. Yeah. And himself was a racist. This is who the Democrats and the opposition within the ruling class that's opposing Trump, this is who they are rallying around as the model of American heroism and democracy. That tells you everything you need to know about why we cannot rely on these people, why we cannot rely on the Democrats, why we can't rely on the system and its checks and balances. They want us to rely on the CIA and the FBI. We can, in the Q&A and discussion, we can get into the CIA and the FBI if you want, who they are. There's an analogy I just wanted to make that Baba Aiken actually makes in this pamphlet, The Coming Civil War and Repolarization for Revolution in the Present Era. There's an analogy he makes to the conflict between the Nazis and the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic was the democratic constitutional republic. It was actually way more progressive, actually. They had a way more progressive constitution, than the US Constitution. But it was the democratic republic that existed in Germany in the 20s and early 30s before the Nazis destroyed it. And, Aiken...
30 seconds.
I only have 30 seconds?
Yeah, 30 more seconds.
Oh, shit.
20 minutes.
This has been 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, damn. Okay, so look, you guys, I'm not even really close. Let me just get 3 minutes. I'm almost done. I'm almost done. The point is, look, I actually had a whole thing I wanted to say about free speech and police, but I can leave that for later, right? The collaboration with the police. The main point I wanted to make is, the Weimar Republic, by analogy, does need to be superseded. It does need to be replaced, but not by something even worse than that, right? And we cannot rally around the Weimar. Everyone who's disgusted by everything these fascists are doing, the answer to it is not to rally behind people like these Democrats. The answer is to get organized for a revolution, to actually get rid of the system that has produced a monster like Donald Trump. And on that, I just want to let everyone know that this Sunday at Revolution Books, we're actually showing this film from Baba Aiken. It's called Why We Need an Actual Revolution and How We Can really make revolution. This isn't talking about a revolution of the mind. This isn't talking about a Bernie Sanders revolution. This is actually talking about millions of people when the system is in a deep crisis and millions are ready to put it all on the line, how to rise up and actually defeat and dismantle and overthrow this oppressive system. Not just the fascists, but the whole damn system and its military and its police, and replace it with a radically different kind of system, the Constitution for the new socialist republic. And that's it.
Rafael. All right, so our next speaker is Reverend Aaron. He's a longtime political activist, anti-fascist activist. He's a co-founder of the Punks for Progress.
Is this thing making noise?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So there was 3 questions on the platform for tonight's event, and so I just basically attempted to answer these 3 questions. So the first question is, what is fascism and the strategy for defeat? So I would say simply the strategy for defeat is to understand it and the people caught up in it as best you can. So that's what I'm going to try to do, explain what fascism is, at least the modern manifestation. So a form of political behavior marked by obsessive preoccupation with community decline, humiliation or victimhood, and by compensatory cults of unity, energy, and purity, in which a mass-based party of committed nationalist militants working in uneasy but effective collaboration with traditional elites abandons democratic liberties
and pursues with redemptive violence and without ethical or legal restraints goals of internal cleansing and external expansion.
The Anatomy of Fascism in 2004. And I think it gets us a good starting point in understanding what fascism is. But I would phrase it like this. When the masses of humanity wake up to the reality that the nearly infinitesimal few who comprise the pinnacle positions of wealth and power achieved that wealth and power through generations of exploitation of the exhaustive labor of all others, capitalism finds itself in crisis. This is when fascism manifests. I have often said that fascism is the astoundingly fearful, ignorant, and manipulated mass being manipulated by an even more fearful few. This is an obviously oversimplified description, but at the heart of fascism is a fairly simple lie. This is a lie that relies on weaponizing ignorance and misinformation in order for it to flourish. That is to say that the primary function of the manifestation of fascism is to, by any violent or manipulative means necessary, convince the masses that capitalism isn't actually the primary cause of most of humanity's most existential threats and crises. Now, to be clear, capitalism isn't the one and only cause of all of humanity's and the world's ills, but it can easily lay claim to a great majority of them. Or at the very least uses many of humanity's shortcomings as tools of manipulation and exploitation for the benefit of that powerful fuel, wildly perpetuating and exacerbating those shortcomings in the process. In the end, fascism is in many ways an amorphous mass that sort of ebbs and flows relevant to the contemporary social conditions, constructs, and the organic divisions that often arise between them, however insignificant or otherwise. But there are a handful of specific commonalities between various forms of historic fascism that we can point to as red flags for modern manifestations of it. So first off, race. While much can and has been described by numerous historians about the role of race, as well as patriarchy, in literally every historic example of fascism, I don't want to devote too much emphasis on this reality other than to say that when the first successful capitalists came to power, they did so under an almost universally accepted as divine principle, the notion of patriarchy being nothing short of some incarnation of nature and the way of the universe as understood at that time. These conditions, contemporary to the first capitalists, assured that both race and gender would ultimately play generational roles in any attainment and ultimately the perpetuation of any real power. With that said, theoretically, had the gender roles been somehow reversed at the time, I think it's conceivable that fascism could have ultimately been possible under a matriarchal capitalism as well. The primary connective component of the equation being, of course, capitalism. Which leads us to scapegoating. Just as Hitler solidified power by demonizing and then murdering socialists, trade unionists, and ultimately millions of Jews, so too do we have now an open campaign of blaming everyone from Muslim refugees of our own foreign policy and Latinx immigrants seeking asylum from our own foreign policy to literally anyone who opposes the current regime as all being somehow responsible for the devastating effects of capitalism on the global masses, but more specifically as an effective fear-mongering campaign meant to not only divert people's attention from the root cause of most global issues, but to garner their near undying support of the very cause itself. And add to that the mythologizing while simultaneously rewriting the past. Hitler spoke of a mythological master Aryan race that he wanted to restore the glory of to the people of Germany. Trump stumbled on "Make America Great Again" to the near same effect. Add to that, what I don't think I have to inform anyone here, that there is a broad and concerted effort to bolster exaggerated nationalism and patriotism. These are obviously common significant aspects of fascism. So these few examples speak to the conditions necessary for the masses under fascism, while these last three speak more to the role of fascists who actually hold power. The first and foremost is a bloated military. Obviously, it's the recent money allocated to the military is historic for an already larger military than the 5 other nations behind us combined. So while simultaneously pushing the intense demonization of all of its detractors. So if you see films, see the films of Dinesh D'Souza and Steve Bannon, right-wing talk radio and Fox News, backed by alt-right online platforms and echo chambers for an ongoing perpetual barrage of examples of demonizing detractor rhetoric. And then finally, you have the most obvious, which is the strong man or theoretically strong woman figure that holds it all together. So that's my understanding of what fascism is. The second question is, what is the correct orientation towards fascism and free speech? And after this one, we'll play that little video. So, what is the correct orientation towards fascism and free speech? Fascists have no respect whatsoever. In fact, have outright contempt for the basic principle behind the very concept of free speech. And any and all invocations of the concept by fascists is always, I repeat, always, in an attempt to ultimately subvert free speech for anyone who disagrees with them. Richard Spencer openly opined recently with some other merchant of stupid violence on a public live stream about how free speech, in no uncertain terms, has absolutely no place whatsoever in their utopian white ethno-state, and they only exploit the concept as a way of bringing their normalization of fascism to a broader audience.
But as far as government regulation, I mean, yes, I think in the short term we would favor government regulation of speech, but long term, are we even pro-free speech?
No, of course not. But we have to use this platform in order.
So we're being radically honest here. And,
yes,
yeah.
Radically pragmatic.
This tactic of subversion isn't any secret to anyone who has observed their actual real-time on-the-street behavior, but it's rare for any current fascist to even approach an honest description, such as that sort of anomalous example, in relation to their true intent and long-term goals. But based on this admission alone, I would assert that in the case of Spencer specifically, we should never allow him any sort of amplified platform based on any notions of the historic concepts of free speech, as he has clearly demonstrated that he brings only his recalcitrance for not only the very premise of the free speech of exchange of ideas, but for the other participants in that exchange as well. And as to other figures espousing narratives similar to Spencer's, we should at the very least approach their invocations of free speech with calculated trepidation. They may have not been so arrogant as Spencer to openly describe their intent, and in most cases, they may not even be intellectually invested enough in terms of nuance to their own embrace of modern fascism, which ultimately manifest in them attempting to oppress the free speech of others as they ignorantly scream in defense of their own. Some here will remember the following account, not least of which my two esteemed co-panelists here who were present and holding it down like badasses on the occasion I'm about to describe. But a year or so ago, there was a constant, it seemed like weekly barrage of fascist rallies here in Berkeley. On one of these occasions, and they all sort of blend together in one anxiety-ridden blob of arrogant, angry, stupid. But on one of these occasions, I read the words of Mario Savio to a group of fascists who attempted to drown me out with heretical chants of "We shall overcome." They used the legacy of Savio and free speech to swindle this campus into letting them practice this perverted manifestation of literal contempt for the history and premise behind it. So the question was, what is the correct orientation to free speech and fascism? Well, they despise free speech, so why should we give them entree into our collective practice of it? We shouldn't. We should tell them to go fuck themselves.
Right on.
And I do mean those words specifically, or something equally virulent and demonstrative of not just our well-deserved lack of respect, but our outright disgust as well. Our contempt for those who show clear contempt for the very foundational principles that a flourishing and collective society arguably ultimately stem from, the open and honest exchange of information and ideas, should garner an equally pestilential response from us. Fascism has been proven out already to be a monstrous threat to the literal survival of humanity. And any grown person who chooses, whether unwittingly or otherwise, to traffic in anything even resembling its tenets should be made to feel the greatest possible shame from that same humanity that it mortally threatens. The orientation of free speech to fascism should be using it to tell them that we resoundingly despise and reject their dishonest intentions. And the third question was, do cops and pigs collaborate? Fuck yeah. I'll give you two examples. August 4th and 5th, there were fascist rallies in Berkeley, or in Portland on the 4th, and then here in Berkeley on the 5th.
This year?
This year. Just a couple months ago. And on both occasions, the fascists had gathered in one place and were outnumbered easily 10-1 by anti-fascists and just people from those communities who said no. Well, the cops lined up against the anti-fascists and opened fire on them with rubber bullets and projectiles and smoke bombs in order to disperse them so that the fascists could rally and march to the streets of Portland. And then the very next day, I saw it myself. We marched from, I can't remember the first park, but we marched from one park.
Was that Ohlone?
Yes, we marched from Ohlone Park, where the fascists had gathered once again, thanks to Amber Cummings and her frickin' traveling shit show, had gathered in MLK. So as we marched and got there, the cops created a line and didn't let us in. So we backed up and we marched down another street where the cops drew a line and blocked us from doing it, and we sort of Groundhog's Day that about 4 times, until on the 4th occasion, they just indiscriminately did the same thing that had been done in Portland the day before, was they opened fire on us with rubber bullets and projectiles and smoke bombs. To protect us from getting to essentially 35 fascists, the vast majority of which were not from the Bay Area, had traveled here from outside the community, but the cops assaulted the citizens of both Portland and Berkeley to defend them being there.
Yeah.
So yeah, cops and Klan, hand in hand. So Gerald gave me some shit because he wanted to see some video. So I'm going to queue up one. This is actually from that day. A real common thing that I've been noticing lately is, if anybody's familiar with Dinesh D'Souza's new movie, Death of a Nation, I really highly suggest you subject yourself to it. It's terrible. And it's just one lie after another. But it ultimately says not only are all the modern liberals actually really fascist, that Hitler himself was a liberal and a progressive. And it's a complete rewrite of history, but it's really taken root in a lot of the alt-right and right-wing narratives. And so on the 5th, I was in MLK Park and happened upon this idiot. Says it's playing.
It's these liberals that are being violent. Oh, shut up, Will. Shut up, Will. Will, shut up. Shut up. Nobody gives a shit. Leftists are being violent. Shut up. It's these leftists that are being violent.
So that asshole with the Trump flag just got done assaulting a woman.
Shut up, Will. Stop being violent. Stop being ignorant. Stop being violent. Stop being ignorant. Stop being violent. Stop being ignorant. Stop being ignorant. Stop being ignorant. But now somebody else turned us on.
That's the guy who organized the demonstration against the Asta Muerte Cafe in Oakland. The Oakland that has righteously refused to serve uniformed police officers.
What about all the people on the right who wear masks, Will? You're a hypocrite, homie. All over the fucking place. Really? You guys don't wear masks. None of the people. All those large being wearing is it the bear bees coming our way? All the eggs filled with shit. All I'm saying is both sides wear masks. Let's not be hypocrite. But not to hide our identity. What's the name of the bill? I think it's Unmasking Antifa Bill. Okay. Not the Unmasking Panther. And it's unconstitutional and it won't happen. That's what Republican fascists do. You should have the right.
So here's where it gets
Fascists are
interesting.
Republicans. No, some Republicans are. Some Republicans are. I said Republicans. I know the distinction. You know the distinction. Name a right-wing fascist. Oh my God, you're Hitler.
Name a right-wing fascist.
Oh, here it is.
Hitler was a
Here's the
socialist.
bullshit. Really? Did you ever read My Kampf? Have you ever read My Kampf? No, you haven't. Right. That's weird how. That's weird how. Just in the name. Let me make my point. You're so incredibly ignorant. So the reason he called it National Socialist, the reason he called it the National Socialist Party is because socialism was
so popular in Europe that he exploited it to sell far right-wing pro-capitalist fascism as socialism. Oh my! Tell me. No, it doesn't. No, you're right. Capitalism doesn't mix with socialism because socialism is the anti-capitalist.
Hitler was all about state-run capitalism.
Right. That's why he's a fascist.
Individuals.
Right.
That is not a right-wing thing. That is a left-wing
thing.
thing.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Socialism is left-wing.
Yes. Socialism
so how is he a
is
socialist,
anti.
but he's a
God, you don't listen to anything.
Rest in peace, Anthony Bourdain.
So socialism by definition is anti-capitalist.
Where is a good socialist country? Can you tell me one that works?
Oh my God, you don't even listen. I just told you what socialist. You think socialists are capitalists?
You told
that
me
shows you what a fucking moron.
Right-wing.
They are, dude.
They're not. Go read a fucking book.
Which book? Which book?
Which dictionary?
Which book?
Go look up a dictionary before.
How about
gay marriage being between a man and a woman,
Let me ask you. What book have you
Between
read on
other
fascism?
adults, right?
If I got to read a book, which book? Which book should I read?
The Bible.
The Bible's going to teach me what fascism is. I've read the Bible extensively.
You need to read the Bible again.
Really?
And sleep with
which
it
verse
underneath.
is going to do good for me?
I don't know, man, you got a verse for this guy? Something you should read to help change his life? Yeah, read Romans 1. Oh, really? Romans 1. What's it say in Romans 1? What did Paul have to say to the people of Rome?
He said that
in his letter to the Romans,
given over to the
even
their men, the unnatural or they had other relations with other men.
Right, because Paul was a huge homophobe, unlike Jesus, who didn't give a shit either way.
Hitler killed all those Jews. It's sin in the Old Testament.
You just got me wrong, Ben Shapiro. God, you listen to Ben Shapiro live streams and tell me to read, and you tell me to read.
Dude, you're so quick to judge.
All right, no, I haven't judged. I'm just calling out facts. I didn't call you a racist.
Lies, bro.
Yes, I did. I absolutely. Fascism is the right way.
Look at us.
Read Mein Kampf. Read Hitler's book, dude. It's virulently anti-socialist and communist from cover to cover.
Say a lie enough times, people will believe it.
Oh, go read Mein Kampf, you moron. Go read Mein Kampf, you fucking idiot.
Thank you, Reverend Aaron. Our next speaker is going to be Gerald Smith. He as well as a longtime political activist and organizer. He's been through multiple political organizations in his lifetime. He's one of which is he's a former Black Panther, and he's currently an organizer with the Oscar Grant Committee. So, thank you. We'll give it up for Gerald.
Brothers and sisters, you know, when you begin to understand the danger of fascism, then I think you'll start to see why people like myself take it so seriously. Turn that thing off. Sorry, excuse me about that. Now, you know, my introduction to fascism was actually strange. Back in New York, before they had the hardcore child labor laws, I used to go down to the, the fabric district and try to catch me some work. And what they had was a shape up. You'd stand out there, foreman would say, okay, you, and you, come on, let's go. And we go to work, and I was big for my age. I was probably about 11. And, I was trying to make a little money, and it cost money to get them silk pants and beaver hat and alligator shoes. So, in that process, I was working with this older Jewish gentleman, and I seen these tattoos on his body. And I said to him, yo, man, what's up? Why you just put some numbers on your shit? Why, some flowers? He said, son, I didn't put this on me. And he began to educate me while we were working. To be honest with you, I didn't believe him. So I went home and I started talking to my father about this. And he confirmed what the Jewish gentleman had told me. And that was the beginning of my understanding, at a very tender age, of what fascism is. Now today, they have something they call they're alt-right, And unfortunately, it confuses a lot of people because there's a whole array of organizations, the Proud Boys, Red Elephant, all these other, and sometimes, for instance, when I showed you that thing with the ID in me, that particular person is blacker than I am. But he works with the fascists. I would prefer to call him a collaborator rather than an actual, because in America, real fascism, when they get to rolling, it's going to be anti-black. Believe me, that's the tradition. That's where they're going. And remember what happened to the Jews in Germany, in Eastern Europe. 6 million dead. When I visited Germany, they took me to the concentration camp. They turned it into a museum. So, I was learning, okay? And I remember I was standing next to a table, and I said, yeah, well, what's that about? Homeboy told me that the shade of the lamp had been made from the skin of Jews. I decided right then I'm not going to be a lampshade. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at this alt-right terrorism in America, and I will answer the questions that we've been assigned to answer. I think you guys may recognize this young man, and I wanted you to see right next to him the huge resistance in this country. Because we don't all agree on, I was going to say, I'm not trying to be unnecessarily argumentative, but I do not believe we're living under fascism now. Because if we were, you would know it. Let me tell you, we wouldn't have a meeting like this. Is Trump a fascist? You know what? I don't think he has the guts. But he certainly is exploiting it. There's no question he has a relationship with these fascists. And our job is not, see, be careful now. The sky is falling, the sky is falling, no, the sky ain't falling. These people can and will be defeated. But you have to know what you're fighting. You can't fight like this here, see, and expect to win. Off with the blindfolds. Let's study this carefully. All right. Now, first I was asked to talk about Nia Wilson to show you how pervasive this is. She was murdered by John Lee Cowell, the 22nd of July. This really hurt me. I don't know, maybe I'm getting old, maybe I'm seeing a little bit too much, but it really messed me up because basically her and her sister were standing on the BART station and dude just went up to him and cut their throat, slashed their throat. Nia was 18 years old, her sister Latifah 26, whose throat was also slashed, but she survived. Cowell is strongly suspected of being in a group called the Proud Boys. That is a neo-Nazi outfit. So what happened? Well, Facebook took down his page, which would improve this. And I would, of course, showed you the page, because I don't want you to believe me. I want you to start off by believing in yourself and thinking for yourself. And that requires you have to, read a book, article, go on the internet. You have to study it to understand it, okay? Now, I will say this too. The next day we went out there and we marched between 800 and 1,000 people. That's how just spontaneously people showed up. This was such a tragic event. And I went to the funeral the next Thursday at Axel Gospel Church out in East Oakland. And I'm pretty hardcore, y'all. I've been seen a lot, done a lot. But when her little sister got up there and started talking about, Nia's life, and she just broke down, I just broke down. I had to leave, man. I had to leave. Because it was just the saddest, for me, one of the saddest moments, that I have experienced. Okay, now this young man, Nicholas Cruz, member of the white supremacist Republic of Florida. See, one of the ways you can tell, I don't want you to be, it's not a mystical thing. We want you to look at this objectively and learn how to reason logically and appreciate the science involved. All of these so-called separatist white nations things are fascists. Don't believe me. Check it out, okay? You gonna separate Florida, huh? See, when they talked about, now let's go back to Homeboy just 1 minute. There was a lot of talk about John Lee Cowell being crazy. Well, he is crazy. But wait a minute. They're all crazy. When you watch Charlottesville, they march around talking about, Jews will not replace us. Jews will not. Slow down. Since when and in what way have any Jewish person said they're going to replace all the white folks in America? You got to be crazy to believe in their bullshit. That's not, and well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't use the word bullshit, excuse me.
It is bullshit.
But because they don't have an ideology, see? No, fascism really, in terms of its ideas, is distilled bourgeois ideology without the frills. There's nothing new here, okay? Okay, so this gentleman, well, if you recall, he went on the campus and just murdered some innocent children. Oh, and by the way, I got in, I kind of get into this a little bit. So, dude was in that Junior ROTC stuff. Pay attention. And he was talking about he wanted to be in the Army. And on the internet, he posted anti-Muslim and anti-Black subject matter regularly. Yeah, it does add up. Don't run away from it. Find your way through it. Understand it. Now, Dylan, oh yeah, this is the last rotation, huh? Now this thing got me. You can read that. You see it. I don't care to read it again. I've done this more than once. When they arrested this person, the pigs took this boy to the burger shop to get him back to Burger King. They took him to Burger King to get him a hamburger. He just been arrested for murdering these people. And they took him to buy a hamburger? No, come on. Oh, so that means they fascists. No, don't jumping all that way. We do have a problem with law enforcement. I'm going to speak on the cops and the Klan go hand in hand later. But just notice, and I think everyone here sees it, well, you try to sneak on the bar, they try to body slam you. But they gonna take homeboy to get him a hamburger? I ain't never heard of no shit like that in my life. I'm not kidding you. Man just murdered 9 people, they take him to buy him a hamburger. Mercy. Okay, got to move it. Richard Collins III was murdered by white nationalist Sean Urbanski in Maryland in an unprovoked knife attack. Did I say they were crazy? Urbanski was part of the Facebook group Alt-Right. Here we go again. Timothy Gottman was slain by white nationalist James Jackson with a sword in New York City. So their big thing, Cowell's crazy. No, they're all crazy, but the question is criminal. That's right, it's criminally crazy. I don't care if you're crazy, that don't give you the right to take somebody's life. Okay, I'm gonna move as fast because I'm sorry I only have 10 minutes. Okay, now this one, Jeremy Joseph Christian murdered 2 white males and badly injured another, who came to the defense of 2 women, a young black girl and another lady who had a chador on. They're sitting on a public train minding their business. He starts to yelling at her. Why don't you go back to Africa or go back to wherever you, blah, 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 blah. And these gentlemen walked up to him and said, hey, take it easy, bro. Take it easy. You girls ain't bothering you, man. Next thing you know, all 3 of them, he had slashed the throat of all 3 of them. 2 of them died. Okay? Yeah, they crazy, all right. But know this, he was a part of an organization, okay? An alt-right organization. I hope you get in the pattern if you dig what I mean. All right. We're not gonna deal with the homeboy. But here's where I think, I support, so just understand, I support Antifa. Okay? Let's make that clear. I support workers fighting in the trade unions for us to win, a decent wage. I support Black Lives Matter. But does that mean, therefore, that my support is like this here? No. We have to look at what we do and judge it and try to improve our functioning. And I'm afraid that part of the problem I'm seeing with my young people, they're not hip to the defensive formulation. You don't go around bragging about what you're gonna do to somebody. If you really want to do damage to somebody, shut your mouth and organize it and carry it out without mercy. But talk. They taping your stuff, fool. They got cameras everywhere. When you move in. Carry it out and go on about your business. But all that noise, it may not be necessary. Learn what a defensive formulation means. And also we, that is people that are against fascism, not just Antifa, We need to lay the historical and political groundwork for the defeat of fascism, because it can and will be defeated. Effective propaganda exposing the fascist history, current leadership, and their actual program. That's a must. Okay, the current mood of the depleted workers' movement is a plague on both your houses. Yeah, I'm gonna give you an example. When I was organizing the longshoremen to come and join the fascist movement, the anti-fascist movement, one of the delegates said to me, he said, "Oh, I ain't worried about that fascism thing. That was just some white folks fighting each other." Now, you saw the first part of this presentation, so you understand where they're really coming from. And yes, it is true that white people are against fascism, and that's positive. But to limit it, that it's just white folks fighting each other, is a gap in consciousness. If I can understand it at the age of 11, fortunately because of my circumstances and my family and other things, we all have to talk to our neighbors and our friends and make sure they're not confused about this. Okay. What is wrong with the anarchist approach to fighting fascism? One, it is overly dependent on the physical aspect of the struggle. That's not, beating their ass is not, so would that make me a big man? No. We have to change the way people look at the fascists. It ignores the political struggle for the hearts and minds of the people. That is, we have to explain to the working class, they're coming to get your ass. Don't be fooled. And when people begin to understand that, we can take the appropriate steps. The anarchists are substituting themselves, that is little Antifa, for the task that only the masses can resolve. And that's key. That's a common mistake that leftists make. They want to go, we got this thing, right? And then next thing they fighting the cops. What the hell are you fighting the cops for? The fact that the fascist is hiding behind the cops mean you won. Think about it. If the fascists can only exist when they hide behind the police, that's good enough. That shows you who they are and what they are. But 20 people arrested on the 5th. Those people were arrested for no reason. We didn't have to get arrested. When we marched and the police set up barricades to defend these fascists. Barricades. So just think, wait a minute, you gonna bump your head into the barricade? No, we won. There's 500 of us, 50 of them. Don't break into jail. They have failed to develop a flexible strategy. They therefore stumble from crisis to confusion to defeat. It's not so much that the anarchists have been defeated or Antifa has been defeated, but we pay very heavy arrests, for instance. Or those 9 people that got stabbed. All right, let me really quickly show you. Doug yelled at the kids, "Charge!" Wait a minute. So all of a sudden, they running at the fascists. These cats done been in jail. They call themselves the skinhead, the Golden State Skinheads. These cats done been in prison. They stabbing each other all the time in prison. So one dude is standing here, right? And the poor kid, he's coming at him. He ain't looking over here. Behind him is another fascist. Waiting, as soon as he pass him, he got him. Thus they stab, that's how all of the political people, PL, all the other groups, that's Progressive Labor, all the political groups that was there, none of them got stabbed. Why? Because they didn't just aimlessly run at people, they stuck together. That is our strength. Our strength is when we are organized, not just doing something. They allow the Nazis to hide behind free speech slogan and take the moral high ground. That made me sick to my stomach. Aaron has already spoke to it eloquently, but I would just like to say this. We do not play that game with fascism and free speech, and here's why. And this is why I try to teach the young people, we have an answer for that. The reason that we do not give fascists or recognize free speech for fascists is because I'm not Bill Clinton. I'm not going to triangulate with the fascists. Oh, you want to kill all the black people? How about just half? No, I'm sorry. I'm not, it's really, it's not funny because that's the Democrats.
Right.
They triangulate. You know, that's what they triangulate and shit. No. Genocide is not debatable. And that is why we don't have to recognize their right to turn me into a lampshade. Get the hell out of here. Okay, so they ignore, now here's the other thing. They ignore mass psychology and tactics. See, when the kids all got their little black stuff and cover up their face, you know, we're gonna get them, there is a certain amount of alienation that the bourgeois media puts on these young people, and it's easy, you know, why are they covering their face? Why, you know, and here, you know, it's probably not a good look. If you want to get people to what? Join you. That's what you want to do. Okay. Now, since fascism cannot be defined in a single sentence, we're going to use a number of properties to help characterize it. One, it's ultra right wing. Okay, let's move on. Nationalists. They even call themselves white nationalists today. I'm moving fast because time is running out on me. The hierarchical cult of personality, the Führer. Oh yeah, that's a part of their thing, that worship of this individual leader. Fascism as religion. Now this quote is from the inventor, Mussolini. You can catch it right quick and you can look at it again, but I do have to keep it moving. They saw fascism as a substitute for religion. The anti-egalitarian and chauvinist part of it, certainly against women. But also, they don't like things being equal among all mankind. That's not that. They believe you're supposed to have some elitism. Boy, hush up all that damn noise. Cancel. Shut up. Oh, man. Tell me hush up.
Oh, shit.
Okay, thank you. Look, let me just, I'm gonna copy my man. I was talking stuff about him, but I need a couple of minutes just to finish up. Everything in the state, nothing against the state, nothing outside the state. That's why it began to be known as totalitarianism. Okay? That's their real program. That's what they're really about. Now, here's something that in America we don't see because there's very rarely any strikes.
Yeah.
The American labor movement, that's what I mean when I say we have a depleted labor movement. Very seldom do you see workers strike. But when that starts to happen with some regularity, you will see the emergence of an anti-labor fascist militia. And I want just, Mr. Leon Trotsky said, and I think he was right, the historic function of fascism is to smash the working class, destroy its organizations, and stifle political liberties when the capitalists find themselves unable to govern and dominate with the help of the democratic machinery. Cops cannot hold us all down. They know that. That's why they want these fascists in abeyance. They want to keep them around so that when we overpower the police, they got somebody they can call. All right. The anti-intellectualism, you know, that's their freedom of speech right there. You see it? That's their freedom of speech. That was a regular occurrence in Germany, a book burning, in case you can't see it. That's what they want to do. And finally, Hitler confesses, he says, only one thing could have broken our movement. If the adversary had understood its principle and from the first day had smashed with the most extreme brutality the nucleus of our new movement. Who could know better than he? My time is up. I'm sorry I didn't get to address the collaboration point, but I'll speak to that later. Thank you for listening.
One fine morning, I woke up early. Bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao. One fine morning, I woke up early to find the fascists at my door. partigiano, please take me with you. Bella ciao, goodbye beautiful. Oh partigiano, please take me with you. I'm not afraid anymore. If I die a partigiano, bella ciao, goodbye beautiful. Bury me upon that mountain beneath the shadow of the flowers. So all the people passing, bella ciao, goodbye beautiful. So all the people passing and say, oh, what a beautiful flower. The flower of the partisan. Bella ciao, this is the flower of the partisan who died for freedom. This is the flower of the partisan who died for freedom.